I forgot to tell you this last time, but you're so handsome. You look like a
Oh,
Hollywood star or
wow.
something.
I
Yeah.
like this. Yeah. You know what? Like, can we clip that and like
Yeah.
just put that as a separate video and I'll just send it to my wife every once in a while and be like, hey.
That's how much I mean to you. Yeah, I like that. Every time my friends make fun of me for being fat, I always reply, "Wait until you have two kids, and then you can talk to me about getting fat and ugly." But in your case, I can't even use that as an excuse because you also have two kids. So I'm kind of lost here.
I think how old are your kids though? Like my kids, the oldest one's only 3, so I'm only a couple of years into this.
Yeah,
So
I can't use that as an excuse either. They're four. They're both four. They're twins.
well, if you're ever out in this area, you can come hiking with me. It'll be great. We'll go
Oh,
see some mountains. It'll be awesome.
yeah, perfect. Look, so this is actually the second time we're recording this interview, which is why it has taken me so long to upload another video. But provided that Will here doesn't dodge too many of my questions, I promise this will be a very good and informational episode.
It was nice of you to send me a whole bunch of the questions ahead of time too. I really appreciate that.
Oh, I think I'm gonna cut that out. No, I'm joking. I'm joking. Yeah. So, Will, you're the head of business at World's Edge, the studio
Mhm.
responsible for the whole Age of Empires franchise, and you've been in that position since 2019 when the studio was created. And now, all jokes aside, it really is an honor for me to have someone in such an important position and someone who's done so much for the game accept my invitation. And so, I thank you very much for taking the time to be here again.
Hey, it's an honor to be invited. I've seen your cast list of all the different people you've interviewed so far, so getting my name up there is really cool.
Yeah, so as you know, I always like to start things off here by hearing about my guest's love story with the game. And in your case, I think it's important to note you're not only the business lead for the franchise, you're also one of us. You're a long-time fan of Age of Empires 2 specifically. So tell me about it. When did you first play the game?
Yeah, I'll say there are people that are bigger fans than I am. Like I've been in those siege engineer forums, and like the level of intensity, like at TUS or those people are like, holy crap. Okay, like I've got a few thousand hours in this game, but like somehow you have like 10x that. So, anyways, let's see. So my love story with Age of Empires started with going over to my cousin's house, and they were playing this cool game called Age of Empires: Rise of Rome. And I think I was like 6 at the time, maybe 7 years
Mhm.
old. H2 hadn't quite come out yet, so basically my older cousins were playing this game. I thought it looked super cool. I particularly liked running around with Photon Man. Didn't
Mhm.
understand why if you killed the deer with Photon Man, you didn't get to harvest the food because I figured it would be a clean way to kill the food. But obviously, that was some game
I
logic.
have to be honest here. I have played Age of Empires 1,
Uh
but
huh.
Rise of the Realm, is that like the expansion for the first game? I'm kind of confused now.
Yeah, and actually, Rise of Rome is probably it's certainly the most watched Age of
Because of
Empires thing
Vietnam,
right now
right?
because
Because
of
of
Vietnam.
Vietnam.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
that's the version they're playing on right now. But yeah, Rise of Rome was the expansion of the original Age of Empires
Mhm.
game, and so that was my intro to it. My parents bought me the strategy book, and like I definitely read that cover to cover. I still have all the cheat codes memorized. Like definitely had a good time with that. But then Age of Empires 2 came out, and that was like kind of next level. And like the this the year it came out, my parents got it for our house for Christmas. And there's like a
Mhm.
picture of me as a second grader, like holding up the thing, just absolutely psyched out of
Oh,
my
you
mind that
you
we had
have
this
you have
Age
to
of
send me
Empires game.
that. I'm gonna pull it up, while you're speaking
Yeah,
whenever we edit this.
I'll see if I can find it. It's somewhere around.
This was 99, right? So Age of Empires 2, Age of
Yep.
Kings was 99.
Yep.
1999.
And
Okay.
yeah, so played a ton of that game. Used to wake up early in the morning before school and I would play it. And I tried to convince my parents, like, I'd open up the history page and be like, no, look, like Byzantines, like I'm learning history, right? Like, no, nobody else in second grade knows what a cataphract is. Like, obviously, I know they're very good against pikemen, right?
There's a
uh,
lot of people who've used that excuse, right?
yeah,
To
of
let their
course.
parents, so their parents let them play computer games. Unfortunately
Yeah.
for me, it did not work that well.
I will. This will be my moment to plug the University of Arizona thing. If you beat the Age of Empires 4 campaign, you get college credit. Okay, like you can go to their website, get all the stuff. They will give you college credit. kids, if you're listening, this is your moment. You can tell your parents, like, no, I'm going to get college credit as a eighth grader because I beat the Age 4 campaign.
Here you
Anyways,
go, guys. Here you go. We're talking about Age of Empires 2, and this guy brings up Age of Empires 4. Microsoft loves Age of Empires 4 more than Age of Empires 2, confirmed. And I'm joking. I'm joking. I'm joking.
I don't think that's the case. But yeah. So, anyways, like played a ton of that game. Like I didn't get to go to my first LAN party until I was a little bit older. We didn't have good enough internet to really play against anybody else, so I got very good at using cheat codes and absolutely smashing the AI with, you know, Cobra Shelby Cobras, and definitely had a good time with that. And then, you know, eventually got to the point where I was old enough to go to LAN parties and everything. My parents would let me go over and play that with friends. I thought that was the coolest thing ever. And I kind of fell away from the game in like 2009. Like,
Mhm,
I guess my computer wasn't strong enough to play Age 3, and I felt kind of left behind there.
mhm,
And in 2009, I went off to college and played a lot of StarCraft while I was there because I didn't really have a way of playing Age of Empires. And
mhm.
I did play a couple of rounds on Game Ranger, but I didn't find Voobly until much later.
Right, you're
And
talking 2009? Yeah, yeah, I think we had Voobly by then already. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
yeah,
2009, there was Voobly. Mhm,
yeah. And then my senior year of college was when HD came out. And obviously, like that was an insta buy for me. It was an insta
mhm,
buy for a bunch of my friends that I used to do the LAN parties with, and it was clearly an insta buy for a lot of other people.
mhm.
But you know, first opportunity to like get out all that pent up, like, hey, I'm better than you at multiplayer, by the way.
Mm.
Like, I've been practicing this one specific strategy for 20 years for this moment, right?
Your moment to
uh,
shine.
yeah, so played a ton of HD. I definitely got into the Black Forest thing because I found out that people were good at this map called Arabia that I never touched before,
Mhm.
and that was not as much fun for me. I was like, no, I just need to wall off and like macro up, and you know, you can leave me alone. So now I'm an arena player, but definitely played a lot of HD, and then obviously got to work on the project and everything else over the long
Right, so
term. So
HD came out in 2013,
it did,
and, that's interestingly enough, that's the year you started working for Microsoft, so I'd like to talk with you about your career at Microsoft. So you started working there in 2013 as a business analyst at first, I believe.
yeah.
So, yeah, how did you go from there to becoming the business lead of, the studio responsible for your favorite game?
Dumb luck, like a lot of luck. So started off at Microsoft. I came in out of, I guess not quite out of school. I did have a brief stint doing some SQL credit card analytics and C# programming. So, but yeah, moved over to Microsoft pretty fast after school, and you know, came in as a contractor and worked on Xbox Live Arcade. Um, did that for about 2 years. Out of that team, the that team handled Minecraft and a couple of other really good IPs that are all on the console side. So it was very console focused business. Microsoft was very focused on console at that point in time.
Mhm, mhm.
And then moved over to work on HoloLens for a bit. My team basically got absorbed into the HoloLens organization, so got to work on augmented reality
Right,
and
that's
got to
like the whole virtual,
yeah.
what was that again? Can you explain
Yeah, so
again
you,
what that
you
was?
put on like these goggles, they map the room around you. And so
Right,
you can
right.
actually see through, but they can drop holograms and other things like that onto the environment around you.
Mhm,
So
mhm.
that team was led by uh, basically the guy who had done a lot of the work on Connect. So it was very creative, and there's a lot of really cool ideas that came out of that group. But yeah, so did HoloLens. They also had like a 3D paint thing and a couple of other things that we got to do. But HoloLens obviously is the one that made like national headlines and
Mhm.
and all that. And we were making games like within that HoloLens and everything else group. It was just a super creative. I would say small, but it was like 1,000 people. So like so, somewhat small, but like not really.
Uh-huh.
So like anyways, basically did that for a year, and then Xbox spun out from that group, and like my team became Xbox Global Publishing, which was kind of like the private equity arm of Xbox, where you go out, you find really cool projects, cool IP, cool developers, and you sign them to you know, games, and you go try to make those games into bigger things. And Age of Empires was one of those things that we got to go invest into. So
Hmm.
myself and a few others basically got to go in and make Age of Empires content again. So yeah, we did that. I at the time was working on Age of Empires, Flight Simulator,
Wow.
Ori and the Blind Forest, and Killer Instinct, a couple of other games. So like everybody had a couple different titles that they were working on. Like, I was the
Hmm.
business manager for those titles, which meant I
Yeah,
had to build a
I
business
know
case
I
for
know
them.
I'm betraying my age with this, but I think Flight Simulator 98, that was easily one of my most played games in my early teens. Such an
Hey,
amazing game.
it was an amazing game. Yeah, definitely. And I mean, when we started working on Flight Simulator X was still like very popular and being used
Hmm.
and being
Hmm. Hmm.
supported. So, yeah, the new Flight Simulator, I think I've got it over there in
2020.
my background. But
I've
yeah,
tried it. It's an amazing game.
yeah,
For people who are
like
interested in aviation, which I am, it's an amazing game.
yeah, it was definitely something else. And getting to go meet like the Bing team and like talking with them about like, hey, like, we have a cool way to celebrate your maps and doing all these
Hmm.
different things, meeting all these partners, and we're like, hey, we're gonna bring all this stuff into one cool project where we've got like Azure streaming, which enables to do stuff, Bing with all their map data, and then we had this amazing studio over in France who Asobo, who was working on the game
Hmm.
as well and like building out some really cool tech that let us kind of live stream that in. Like truly, like it was it was an honor to be able to have worked on that. And
Absolutely, I can imagine.
yeah, so anyways, did that and then also had the Age of Empires stuff. And yeah, like obviously at some point Age of Empires grew to the point where it was too big to be part of like the overall like global publishing thing, so we had to spin ourselves out and go
Hmm.
found a studio that was kind of dedicated, that could better reach all the people that had come into play.
Hmm.
And we didn't do that until after the first definitive edition came out. Like that one came out and it did better than we expected. And we're like, oh, okay,
Hmm.
like people are still playing these games. Like that, we can tell like there's millions of people that are still playing these products, and this is awesome. And we need to go and invest against this thing. And
Hmm.
um,
Just a small note here. I believe the HD version, so we're talking about the 2013 version on Steam,
mhm.
that I believe GameSpy or whatever the company is, claims that there were 5 or 6 million copies sold of Age of Empires 2 HD, which is an incredible number, just mind blowing.
Yes, I have no idea what has been officially confirmed, but there were a lot of people that played Age of Empires 2 HD, myself included, and it seems like you as well. Although you may have spent most of your time over on Boobly.
Yeah,
But
I bought it because I wanted to support the franchise, but I was playing on Unruly at that time.
yeah, so I will say though that even I guess I definitely saw a path where people would buy HD and then like once they got into the core thing, they would kind of figure out, oh, hey, there's the Voobly stuff. And talking with
Right.
some of the Voobly people, like it definitely like HD coming out definitely drove a lot
It
more
helped them. Yeah,
awareness and brought a lot of
absolutely.
people in there. So
Absolutely. Hmm.
it's another one of those examples where like, hey, having a couple of these different products in the market, even if it's literally the same game, like it
It's
can
helpful for everybody.
yeah, it
True.
can definitely rising tide, right? Raising all
Hmm.
the ships there. So yeah. So, anyways, worked on the Age of Empire stuff. Like, moved to do that exclusively, and like that's kind of it. Like that was basically how I got into this particular role, doing business stuff. Like when we formed a new studio, Shannon, who was the studio head, asked me to come over and lead business specifically.
Hmm.
And I guess I did that and data science for a little bit, but data science was a pretty small function for us at that point because we only had like one product in market.
Hmm.
So grew that, and then H2 DE came out, and that blew away expectations as well. A lot of people showed up for that, and even like the launch, like it didn't start off crazy high, but it just grew over time, especially with
Hmm.
like the pandemic coming in was
Yeah,
like, hey,
combined
everybody's
with the
staying home,
pandemic.
like
Hmm.
massive
Hmm.
spike of users, people who just came in and were like, oh, this is the best way to play H2 now, awesome, like,
Hmm.
and,
Hmm.
and that was
Yeah.
that. So
So the Age of Empires 2 DE came out in 2019, and at least for me, the pandemic only really came into existence, or that's where it started affecting me in 2020. So just a couple of months later,
yeah.
which probably all everything combined, all the lockdowns and whatever, it's probably made this whole boom of people wanting to play Age of Empires 2.
Yeah, it was Yeah, I mean, there was definitely, I think, a lot of people had extra free time, and
Hmm.
for a good chunk of our Age of Empires players, that meant, hey, like I can finally beat this campaign, or I can finally try out ranked, or something along those lines. So
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
it was very cool that we got to be a part of that.
Mhm. Awesome. So a few months ago, I was watching Nili's stream, and he was making a top 10 list of the most influential personalities in the Age of Empires 2 competitive scene. And, some of the names on that list were the ones you would pretty much expect. So there was Memb, there was T90, Spirit of the Law, and then there was you. And, that was what initially piqued my interest because up to that point, I'd heard your name here and there a couple of times, but I wasn't aware of how much you had actually done for the game. And so, what have you done to earn the extreme honor of being included in Nili's list?
I signed Nili's checks. That's what.
Oh, it's all that you did? Wow, okay.
Yeah, I mean, like my role is really like to make sure that there's a good business case for the Age of Empires franchise, make sure that Microsoft is investing into it. And like, I honestly, like, I'm not the person who creates that case. I'm the person who sells that case, right? So
Mhm.
like, people go out, we have millions of people that play Age 2 HD. Well, like that gives us the leeway to go and say, hey, like Microsoft, maybe we should go make more of this stuff. And so my role really is to take, I guess, the reflection of, hey, this is what's going on in the community. These are all the people that are playing this game. Let's go out and go build that and sell that within the organization. And then, like there's also passion projects for me, like things like esports. So myself and plus two Joe would go in and, like, early days, ask for money so that we could go sponsor this cool tournament called Nili Apartment Cup or Hidden Cup. But it was kind of unknown. And like, I definitely got the question one time where somebody was like, why are we sponsoring somebody's apartment cup? Like, what are we doing there? And I'm like, no, it's really cool. Like, you're going to like it. It's going to be awesome. And they're like,
Uh-huh.
okay. But
Yeah, I
whatever
think it's
that
very
is.
important to make a distinction here because people are probably not aware of this, but when Microsoft released the 2013 version, the HD version, there was barely any support for esports. So there was a couple of tournaments were sponsored. To be fair, Battle of Angkor. There were a couple of tournaments, mainly organized by Zero Empires, who's been a guest on this show, by the way. But broadly speaking, there was very, very little support for the esports competitive scene in Age of Empires 2, and that has definitely changed with the E version, which I'm assuming is due to you. So thank you very much for that, my friend.
Yeah, well, I can't take all the credit, but yes, it definitely is. Like, if you look at the audience, like it's been growing every year. If you look at how many
For
hours of
tournaments,
viewership,
absolutely.
yeah, like are coming in for Age of Empires stuff, like every year there's more and more people that show up. So I
Mhm.
mean, it's really the tournament organizers. Like, they self-organized before we ever came in with dollars, right? They started
Mhm.
building out their stuff. You have, Zero Empire, sure, like he's now over at Relic, but before
Working on
that, like
AoE4?
running things like ECL and all those other things, like some of them worked out really well, some of them didn't work out as well, and we kind of tested a whole bunch of different ideas to see what stuck with the community.
Mhm.
And at the end of the day, like, we've got a couple of full-time streamers now, which is
Right. Right.
super cool. And
That's a big change, which I think it's
yeah,
what this whole Microsoft sponsorship is allowed to happen because it was really hard before.
yeah. And I will say, like, the I think that the community probably could have done it without us, because the community in Vietnam did do it without us.
Okay.
Like, they have their whole AoE Star League, and there's like 5 professional teams all backed by a whole bunch of stuff,
Wow.
which
That's
is crazy.
crazy.
But like, obviously we were able to kind of bring some gas for the fire that was already going, that the
Uh-huh.
community had started. And even now, like, we're very hands off compared to a lot of the other companies where,
Mhm.
like, they want to have tournament licenses and everything else,
Mhm.
and we're like, I'm sorry, you want to play Age of Empires? Awesome, like, by all means,
Go
like,
ahead.
can we give you money to do that?
I'm curious now, though. How many viewers do they get for like a final of a big tournament in Age of Empires 1?
For Age One,
Yeah.
the highest I've seen was 160,000 concurrent viewers on
Dude.
stream.
Wow.
Yeah, so
Okay.
yeah,
Those
that
are
that community is over on
mind-blowing numbers.
Facebook, but like
Mhm.
their version of the Viper, like the guy who wins the stuff,
Uh-huh.
like he has 1.3 million followers on Facebook, which
Mind-blowing. Mhm.
Jim Say Dinang is his name. Like, it's crazy looking at those numbers. You just kind of look at it and go, oh wow, that's
Do they have like spectator tools as well, or is it
no,
everything?
they
Okay.
don't. Yeah, so the game actually originally was, I guess, for age one, was originally like prepackaged in on the operating system.
Right, right. That's
But
what I
there's
heard.
like a hacked version of the game. At least this is as I understand it from some Vietnamese community members that have informed me on it. So
Hmm.
um, they like a ton of people knew the game, a ton of people picked up the game, and now there's like business people that back these different teams and are like, oh
Hmm.
yes, I have my professional Age of Empires Rise of Rome team, right? And they're like doing their
Amazing,
thing. So
amazing.
yeah, it is amazing. Like truly the
Hmm.
the amount of like energy and excitement on some of those trailers too. Like I like check them out. I'm like, that's a good idea. Maybe we should do something like that.
Crazy! Wow.
So yeah, it's
Um,
very cool.
I'm old enough to remember the day Microsoft closed the zone and stopped supporting Age of Empires 2. This was back in 2006.
Mhm.
And so, for the folks like me who've been around forever, something that's always on our minds is how long will Microsoft keep supporting this game? And I say this because despite the blockbuster successes of tournaments like Hidden Cup 4, Red Bull 5, and King of the Desert 4, I couldn't help noticing that the number of people playing the game has stayed remarkably consistent. So it
Mhm.
looks like the undeniable success of all these events doesn't seem to be driving up the sales numbers. Now, we all realize Microsoft is not a charity foundation. It's a profit driven company that wants to make money. Money that can undoubtedly be made with the release of DLCs such as the Dynasties of India, which, to my great shame, I'll admit I pre ordered as soon as it was announced. So,
Hey, I'm not the right person to be sympathetic on that. Like, that's great. By all
but
means.
yeah, I'm wondering, is this how we as a community can ensure Microsoft will keep investing in the game? Will support for the game always be dependent on how well these new DLCs sell?
So, I mean, obviously, DLC sales are something that's good to have,
Hmm.
but like
So,
realistically,
yes.
from the community's perspective, like the stuff that we are looking at is like, you know, are people playing this game? And it turns out that there are still people playing Age of Empires 2. And as long as there's
You
still
could say
people
that.
playing Age of Empires 2, like we're going to say, hey, there's a lot of people playing this game. Let's go continue investing. I think the next thing is like we get a lot of feedback from the community. So like keep going into those forums and telling us like, hey, this is the thing that will make this game better. And that stuff lets us improve the game, lets us improve retention, lets us basically direct the investment that we're making into the game. So like you go buy a DLC, we use that DLC to go and fund a team who goes and improves the game to do different things. So I don't know, you see
Hmm.
the most recent patch update, you have like the rematch, right? That's something that's been on our list of, hey, it'd be really cool if at the end of a match you can like click rematch and
Hmm.
basically get right in with the same group. Um, but like, obviously, we have a massive list of things we'd like to put into the game, and we adjust the priority of those things based off of both a combination of what people at FE and Microsoft want, because there's a lot of core players there, but also what we see in the community is, hey, like this is a big deal to us. Like I don't know. Like I'm kind of back and forth on the Mangonel delete thing because I liked watching people who were at my ELO delete their Mangonels and not ever hit
Yeah,
anything, and that
I'm
was
not
really
too
nice.
sure about that one as well. I
But
mean, it's
it
good that they
seems
can
like
fix it.
yeah, it does seem like based off the polls that generally people were in favor of it. So
Okay.
what do I know? But
Mhm.
that's just one of many examples where like hey there's like obviously we wouldn't have even known about that bug if it wasn't for the community and the pro scene being like hey you can delete mangonels and get extra stuff. And I don't know if you've
Mhm.
seen that Hera clip where he deletes it like killed like 100 plumed archers in a single
Yeah,
shot.
yeah, yeah, of
Like,
course.
so I mean there's definitely some cool stuff like that which is I guess I'll miss that to an extent, and I will miss people of my ELO deleting their mangonels because they think that
And
they can
missing.
be Viper or Hera or MBL. But you
Right, we're
know,
gonna miss those moments, right? When people try to go for that and they fail, because those
yeah.
make for great esports moments as well.
But I will say it'll make Huang a much better player, and I'm very excited to see
Fair
how
enough.
his offensive does now on that hill versus inevitably Hera, who he'll find on the ladder like 15
Hmm.
times out of 16 matches for Hera's next stream. So
If I'm not mistaken, the first game that Harris played after he came back from
yeah,
League of
that's
Legends
Swang.
was against Swam. That was so funny. Yeah, but we're veering off. We're veering off here.
Yes, yeah,
So
yeah. Sorry.
is DLCs, all those things, bug fixes, all of that is because DLCs sell. So yes,
Well,
to my
it's
question, basically.
yeah, I mean, it's not just DLCs, right? I guess there's two different groups of people that you have to think about when you think about like keeping Age of Empires healthy. There's, hey, are we keeping existing fans happy? And normally that's where you get the DLC and everything else. But it's also new people because new people come into the game all the time, and they hear about, oh, Age of Empires, it's a good game, and maybe there's a sale or something like that. But the base game continues to sell. People continue to come in that are new to the game, and we want to make sure that they have a good experience when they first come in as well, right? So like, obviously we don't want to just drop somebody and be like, hey, welcome to ranked, like good luck, like you're going to play against a bunch of people that have been playing this game for 20 years and probably lose your first 10 to 15 matches before you finally find somebody at 600 elo. So like improving that onboarding experience, and like I guess we get a lot of feedback on things that are like, hey, this bug's annoying me, and that's great for core retention, but it would also be great to get the feedback for things like, hey, my friend started this playing this game for the first time and he's wondering why it's this way, like why not this.
Hmm.
Like that sort of stuff is super valuable because it basically lets us onboard new people to this game that we've all been playing for the past 20 years.
Hmm.
And I don't want to call them fresh meat, but it is nice to have some new people coming into the experience
Hmm. Hmm.
of age two. So
Right.
yeah.
Something that I always wondered, would something like the introduction of skins be something you guys would ever consider? And this is a model that, I don't know, some of the most successful games like CSGO, Dota 2, Fortnite, all these games have adopted this model.
Mhm. Yeah. So I mean, a lot of those games are free to play games, which
True.
and they're kind of designed from the ground up as free to play games. So like as it stands right now, we have, I guess we view
Though
these
CSGO
games.
wasn't. CSGO wasn't.
You're right. You're
And
right.
they had
CS:GO
skins
wasn't.
before it went free to play.
Yeah, and CS:GO obviously very successful game, has tons of people playing it, and it's still very. I still play CS:GO every once in a while, like, and
I
I'm not
think
very good at shooters, but
Yeah, I think
uh,
it's just the perfect spectator game. I
yeah,
feel like I could teach my father or my brother, who doesn't necessarily like computer games. I could teach them what it's all about, and they would enjoy it. It's just a perfect spectator game. I feel like. But yeah,
yeah.
go ahead.
I,
Sorry.
I think I play that mostly to offset because my friends like are mostly shooters that they
Hmm.
like to play. So we'll play a little bit of CS:GO, and then we'll go play a game of Age of Empires. And then I have to play like 5 more games of CS:GO, so they can feel
Hmm.
like, yes, like I am better than Will because I mean they are better than me at shooters, but if we get into an Age of Empires game, I have a pretty good chance of taking them on. So yeah. Anyways, like yeah, obviously there's a lot of stuff that we throw around internally, like hey, like what do we think about this? I I have some hesitation on certain types of monetization, not necessarily specifically skins, but there's certain types of monetization that I look at and go, like, our audience will not like this, or this won't feel like it's additive to the audience. Um, and I guess something like loot boxes. Like, if we put loot boxes in the game, like I personally, as an Age of Empires player, wouldn't particularly appreciate that. I'm pretty sure that there'd be a lot of people that look at it and say, "Hey, like, what are you doing to my 20-year-old game that I've been playing for what's going on here? Like,
Hmm.
why are you doing this to me?" So, and I think it would be illegal to have it in the Netherlands. So, like, just
Okay.
say goodbye to half the capture age team, right?
True.
So,
True.
yeah, like, so there's a lot of stuff that we've talked about. I'm not necessarily ruling anything out at any point in the future, but
Okay.
we are looking at potential new ways to keep people engaged and you know
Okay,
keep the
that's
lights on for the
actually good to
servers.
know. I was expecting to hear a resounding no from you, but good to know that you're exploring options. So, we've talked privately about Voobly before, and you told me how much respect you have for the amazing work that folks like Elusive, Chris, Taff, and many
Mhm.
others have done there. And the reason I'm bringing this up is just to let people know you're indeed very familiar with Voobly and the role it played in the history of Age of Empires too. Now, one big difference between Voobly and DE is obviously the matchmaking system. Now,
Mhm.
personally, for my needs, the matchmaking system in DE works beautifully, though I must say I only play 1v1s. But I still see every now and yeah, I think it's an important distinction, but because I heard a lot more complaints about the team game matchmaking. But anyway, I still see every now and then people complaining about not being able to just play one map and grind that map as much as they want. And as far as I can tell, that's also true for Age of Empires 4, by the way. Now,
Mhm.
of course, you could say people can create lobbies, but then again, lobbies are unrated, which makes it difficult to judge your opponent's skill level. So, how would you defend the current matchmaking system against those complaining about not being able to just grind one map? Why are they not getting, I don't know, rated lobbies, as was the case with Voobly, for example?
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm on the defensive here. I'll.
Okay,
uh,
okay. So
so
that's dodge number one, guys.
this
Keep
is.
keep
I was wondering
keep
where the
counting.
mass Mora name was going to stick in here, right? Like it's dungeon, right? That's what that means. So, yeah, I guess I've entered the dungeon. Um, let's see. So I mentioned before we have a long backlog of things that we would like to improve. Like
Mhm,
obviously, there's stuff that we would like to improve on the matchmaking side, and it's just a question of prioritization. We're constantly rolling out bug fixes and improvements to the experience, and I, there's going to be improvements down the road for a lot of these things, right? And
mhm,
I am not the person who owns the prioritization of that list. There's a whole group of people that are part of that.
mhm.
But I will say, just in terms of looking at the game, the people who are playing ranked matches, they're not a gigantic percentage of the audience, right? Like there's a good number of them, and they're super important to us because they're the biggest fans of Age of Empires
Right.
who like they're in these ranked matches. But a lot of the time, we do spend a lot of energy on making sure that the single player versus AI experience is good or the campaign experience is good. So there's a lot of different competing priorities within there. Um, we did roll out kind of a an initial round on that rated lobbies things with deathmatch.
Right.
So like that does exist, and we basically have a data science team, which I mean true, right? Like
The DM guy.
the
The
DM
DM
guy,
guy.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So like he's a data scientist sitting on our team who's going through that data with another couple of other people, and they're looking through and saying like, how is this impacting the ecosystem? Is this a good thing for Age of Empires, right? And if things end up going and looking up, then there'll be more of the same, I imagine. But as it stands right now, like it's just a long list of things that we have to get done,
Mhm.
and like I guess perhaps it hasn't been prioritized up to this point. Like obviously, there's a lot of improvements that have happened if you just look back to 2019.
Mhm.
Um, Actually, I think when DE launched, you couldn't even play matchmaking because the servers fell over because so many people came
Oh,
in all
in
at
the
once.
first day,
So,
yeah.
so like we're trying to improve things, and I think the team's doing a good job to go and basically make sure that the improvements they're prioritizing are having maximum impact along the way.
Right, so changes are coming. Is there something that you would say is a no-brainer, something that needs to be fixed, not necessarily rated lobbies, but something about the matchmaking system that, as you stand here now, you would say, "Yeah, this definitely needs fixing."
Well, I mean, there's definitely like there's obviously some things that we look at and say, hey, this is something that we need to go take a look at. I think probably the easiest one is, hey, there needs to be a rematch thing, right? Like
Okay.
we need to be able to get to the end of a match, and like it's kind of painful to go get everybody back into a lobby with the same settings and everything after you play a match right now. So making sure that people are able to play a match, and then if they want to go play another match, just quickly say, hey, like I'm hitting this button and everybody's back in this lobby and we're going to go rematch against each other. That's huge because that's going to increase the number of people that are having, I guess it's going to increase the length of time that people are having fun with Age.
Mhm.
And so for me personally, that was one of the biggest things. I was like, oh, yes, like amazing. We finally have this thing in here. But there's obviously there's a good number of things that the team has identified internally, and I'm not at liberty to go and say exactly
Absolutely,
what these
absolutely.
things are.
I'm not gonna insist, I'm
But
gonna insist. But
yeah.
just one question, that rematch would be unrated then? People would just join a lobby, and that rematch would be an unrated match?
Oh, who knows? Because that hasn't been publicly announced yet, so I'm not able
Oh,
to talk
right.
about any of that.
Okay, okay, let's move on then. You
So
know,
yeah.
So we're gonna up the stakes here. So something that has long been the reason for speculation in the community is whether Microsoft would have agreed to release Age of Empires 2 DE and all the DE versions if it weren't for Age of Empires 4. And you will hear a lot of folks claiming the only reason the E versions exist is because Microsoft wanted to put the name of the franchise back on the news and get all the different communities excited for the release of Age of Empires 4. So, in other words, the DE versions were all part of a marketing strategy. Is there any truth to this?
Well, first of all, marketing is a separate person. There's another guy who does marketing for Age of Empires, and like, but I can say definitively that like marketing has their strategy playbook, and we have our own strategy playbook. But I guess one of the things that was important to us is to go and reactivate that Age of Empires audience before we launched Age of Empires 4. That is true. There are a lot of different platforms that people are playing Age of Empires 2 on, right? There were 20 different platforms that people were playing Age of Empires 2 on. And
Crazy.
it was definitely important to us that we were able to reach all of those people. And we knew that it would take time. Like you can't just release a product and expect everybody to be like, oh, cool, there's a new thing here. Like we needed to get those people ideally onto one platform where we could say, hey, like people who are playing Age of Empires 2, like there's more Age of Empires content. Isn't this great?
Hmm.
And so the first thing for us was, hey, let's go build quality versions of these different games and try to get those people all into a single spot where we can talk to them and say, hey, like we're providing updates for this one version of the game now.
Hmm.
If you want
Hmm.
to be on the latest and greatest, like this is the thing. And obviously you have to lead with quality in that sort of a scenario. And then, I guess the plan was always like, hey, we're going to do these definitive editions and then we're going to launch Age of Empires 4. And the learnings actually kind of went both ways for us, right? Like we needed to relearn how to go build those PC games. We needed to learn how to test them and localize them because PC audience is way different than console audience. And a lot of the internal staff that we had were really good at console, but it had
Hmm.
been a long time, if ever, that they'd done PC games. So
Right.
we basically cut our teeth on the definitive editions, and then we got to go launch Age of Empires 4. So saying that it's like, hey, like Age 2 is just a marketing strategy. Like, I gotta tell you, like, I love Age of Empires 2. That's a game that I've been playing for a long time. Of course, I wanted to make a remaster of that game, like, and make the like some version of it that had some sort of server backing and everything else, and like give us an excuse to go and invest into like adding additional civs and adding additional content to that was like, I don't know, that's kind of a dream come true for 7-year-old me, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
So, um, and I think there's a whole bunch of things to talk about just along those lines, but um, I think the biggest one is people never stopped playing Age of Empires, and it would have been really unintelligent of us not to go and make sure that we talked to all of those people beforehand, found out what was important to them, and tried to make sure that we could bring them into this Age of Empires community. And I'll say now, like, you can go play Age of Empires, any version that you want, like Age 1, 2, 3, or 4, and it's kind of the best time to ever go do that.
Absolutely.
Um, which is something that I personally am immensely proud of. But
Hmm.
obviously the team is very happy with, and like we do feel like there's millions and millions of Age of Empires. There's more players now than there have been probably at any other point before,
Hmm.
which is crazy for a franchise that has
Absolutely.
been through what Age of Empires has been through. And really, the reason we were able to do that was because people just kept on playing these games.
Hmm. Hmm.
So
So what you're saying is basically that it's not impossible that Age of Empires 2 DE would have been released anyway, but probably the scope of the project would have been a little bit smaller if it didn't have the cover of Age of Empires 4. Would that be a
yeah, I
fair
would say
assessment?
like Age of Empires 4 did give like some breathing room to Age 2 to go and invest. I mean, there's a lot of things that we are able to use in Age of Empires 4 that were built out for Age of Empires 2, and vice versa, things that were being built for Age 4 that are used in Age 2, especially on things like matchmaking.
Hmm.
And so, yes, the products definitely benefit from each other.
Right. That would be a perfect segue for my next question. Yeah, I've heard you and other people express this thought that both games, AoE 2 and 4, can benefit from one another. So what exactly do you mean by that?
Oh, there's a lot of reasons that they can benefit from each other. But like I'll say, like going back to the earlier point, like everybody's going to have their own favorite way to play Age of Empires. Some people it's Age of Empires. For the nation of Vietnam, it's Age of Empires 1.
Hmm.
For like a lot of Europe, it's Age of Empires 2. And like you have Age 3 and you have Age 4, and like you know there there's not necessarily tons of overlap between all those different games, and people go through different phases where they kind of play one version of the game and then they go play a different Age of Empires game. And bringing out Age 4 was just a new chapter for the
Hmm.
franchise,
Hmm.
right? So like absolutely they do benefit from each other both directly in terms of the production process, because they can share certain resource, they can share learning stuff back and forth, and like, hey, we did this and it was really good, and then the other team goes and says, oh, like let's try it out
Let's
here.
try it. Hmm.
But then also just from like a Microsoft size perspective, right? Like Age of Empires 2 and 4 are in one studio, and so our studio gets a certain amount of like funding and everything else, and it helps to have multiple products within that portfolio that are doing well. Like Age 2 was obviously a big hit for us, and
Hmm.
we are continuing to expand that. And like there's changes that have been made to the core game, there's changes that have been made to the number of DLCs that we've put out there, and then
Hmm.
Age 4 was basically modeled off of that, right? Like Age 4 was absolutely like, hey, like, can we go make another kind of Age 2 style game? Like, it's the same era, it's a lot of other things.
Hmm.
And we, obviously tested a whole bunch of different ideas, like making the civs more diverse
Hmm.
with Age 4 that we, would have probably otherwise tested at some point in Age of Empires 2. But we had this Age 4 product and we can go try it out there and see how it goes. So,
Right, right, right.
yeah.
Okay, so let's get to the juicy part here, Will.
Oh boy.
Tournament funding.
Mhm.
Tournament funding. So, in the first few months of 2022, it seems clear that despite having a smaller player base than Age of Empires 2, the Age of Empires 4 competitive scene is getting more financial support from Microsoft, which I guess is understandable from a business standpoint. There's probably more money to be made with Age of Empires 4 right now. However, this has angered a lot of Age of Empires 2 fans who are now directing their rage towards Nili, the tournament coordinator for the whole franchise. Now, I know Nili personally, I like him, and it obviously pains me to see the amount of hate he's gotten. But the fact is, we actually know very little about how this whole sponsorship allocation process works. And I'm hoping you can shed some light on it. Now, if I understand things correctly, Nili reports to you. So you're his boss, right?
uh Kind of. He's kind of a hybrid thing between myself and our lead community person, Emma. So, like, definitely on like going in and looking at tournament funding, like that's mostly me. And then Emma's like, hey, like, how is this impacting our overall community, and how are things going there? So, I guess I'll address your first question, which is kind of tournament funding and AoE 2 versus AoE 4.
Right. So before you go on, while you do that, as much as you can, try to describe how this whole process works and what exactly is Nili's role in it. This is something which I think is very important for the community to understand what exactly can Nili do and cannot do.
Yeah. Okay. So we partner with Nili, and before that, we partnered with Robo, basically to go and find somebody who really knew the community well and knew the pro scene, knew the tournament organizer, and everything else. And we said, hey, you guys, please go develop a calendar for partnered tournaments for us and help develop out whatever that is. Make sure that we're hitting certain audience, like Mem has a certain type of audience and T90 has a different audience, right? And um, Lidacor has a certain audience, right? There's all these different people, and we share with Nili like the strategy that we have around like, hey, like we're going to be releasing a DLC for Age of Empires 2 called Dynasties of India in this window. And there's a couple of different things you have to think about when you're doing something like that, because you have like production release schedule, and sometimes when we release updates, the game does crazy things that nobody expected. Like sometimes you fix auxiliary walls on gates to make them take damage from the side, and all of a sudden your town centers are taking 500 damage from Maganels. Like this happens sometimes, right? And so we generally like to make sure that the big tournaments are a little ways away from some of those other adjustments that
Right.
we're making, so we can have some time to make sure the game is nice and stable and we don't end up
Stable.
with
Right. Right.
people winning games because of bugs or something like that. Nobody likes that. So Nili has a very tough job right now in going to like kind of dance around a whole bunch of these different things, make sure the game is stable, make sure that like the communities have a certain amount of funding, and that it's driving some sort of business thing for us in terms of like, hey, we have a Dynasties of India thing, like let's go have a tournament about elephants or something like that, right? So he has to kind of navigate all of that stuff. um, so after Nili comes up with his calendar, which obviously, like I will say, Nili, we do go talk to a lot of the tournament organizers beforehand. Like Nili was kind of chosen by his peers in a
Hmm.
lot of ways. But then he works with myself, he works with Emma, to get basically agreement on what we're going to go support and focus on. So if you don't want to send him, no, don't send him angry stuff. Like if you're really upset, like feel free to send it to me. I'll create a special alias, like World's Edge Complaints or something like that, and I'll post it on my Twitter or something along those lines. You can just send all of your angry notes there, and I promise I will look through them on days where I'm feeling way too good about things. It'll be what I do instead of going to AoE Zone.
Right.
Uh,
Oh, you do go to AoE Zone. That's good to know.
hey, I
Right, but
introduced myself on AoE Zone.
you
I've seen you
did,
there.
and
Like,
then you disappeared, and then you
oh no,
disappeared.
I lurk on AoE Zone. Like
You do.
I
Okay,
check that
cool.
almost every day.
That's cool to know. That's very good to know.
um,
Yeah, but go back to the first point that you actually wanted to address, regarding Age of Empires 4 having more support currently than Age of Empires
mhm.
2, despite having a much smaller player base.
Yeah, so I mean, like, obviously, the player base size, it doesn't actually show up necessarily as directly. So like saying that it's much smaller than H2 isn't
Okay, let's
necessarily
go with
correct,
smaller. Let's go with
because
smaller.
well, I guess I'm just saying like Steam is only a component of the launch that we had for Age of Empires 4. But I will say, like, look, there's a lot of really cool tournament organizers and casters in the community, and we do want to go sponsor them, and we want to help grow their channels. We want to help grow their different things. And when H4 came out, there were a lot of new people that came in. There was a lot of self-funded content as well. Like EGC came in and started self-funding a couple of different things, which was great to see. Like they bring their own capital. Like T90 has his new tournament series that he just announced. Like, and that's, I think, self funded for that one. So like there's a whole bunch of different people that are now coming into the ecosystem. Red Bull, invest into the ecosystem as well. And so there was obviously a strategy for us at the beginning of the year. We said, hey, we're launching this Age of Empires 4 game, and we would like to see the game be successful on the esports side. We want to see if there's an audience for the esports side of this game. And so we invested against that. And if you look at the Age 2 stuff, like we just announced a $200,000 tournament for Age of Empires 2.
You
That's
did.
coming, like that's more than what we had last year. Um, so like I understand like people feel that velocity of, hey, like Age of Empires 4 is getting more money, and like there's a lag time for Age of Empires 2 in terms of different events. But really that's just, we do have a slightly more crowded calendar with Age of Empires 4. It's just one more hurdle for Nili or Robo, whoever, to go try to navigate. Um, that doesn't mean those tournaments aren't happening. They are still happening. They are still, like, channels are still growing. People are still showing up for those events. And like I will say the big thing in my mind, the thing that I want to see us do on the esports side is make sure that we have a healthy group of content creators and like tournament organizers. And if we're able to find the right partners for doing tournaments that kind of shape up with our DLC and everything else, like love to go in and say, hey, like have some cash, like to go and improve your channel, go grow your channel in some capacity, because everybody benefits in that scenario. There's more
Hmm.
people that are going to come in and watch, because there's more variety in the casting, and there's more people that are going to find out about Age of Empires, just because there's more content that's being produced in the first place. So
Right. So I totally understand the need to be a little bit ambiguous here. And I'm just going to try to poke some holes as much as I can, or not poke some holes, just make sure that I understand things correctly. So you said there's a strategy of supporting specific tournaments or specific games at different times of the year, depending on what exactly is most important right now. So that strategy comes from you. So the bias for AoE4 having more support right now, currently, comes from you, or from the business lead side, and not necessarily from Nili. Is that
uh,
correct?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm an influencer on it. That's why, if you're angry about it, send me the hate mail. Don't send it to Nili. But
So Nili's following orders.
wow, yes. I mean, look, there's nothing. There's no person is an island on this team, right?
Right.
Everybody has some sort of impact. Like the community team has a say. Our production teams have a say. Like Emma and I try to condense that into, hey, like, here's roughly when some stuff would be good. And then you have Nili, who's like kind of the voice of the community out there for us in those meetings saying, hey, like, this is something that I think would be important. And a lot of the time, it's also the tournament organizer who will bring in and say, like, hey, like, you know, Mem, what do you want to go do here? Like, what sounds good to you? What do you think would be best for your channel? Because they're the ones that are the experts on their own channel. So we want to make
Hmm.
sure that whatever it is that we're doing is taking advantage of whatever knowledge they have as content creators. So yes, are we still funding Age of Empires 2 and Age 4 tournaments? Yes, we are still funding Age of Empires 2 and Age 4 tournaments. Are we funding more dollars in terms of Age of Empires 2 and Age 4 tournaments? Look at Liquipedia. Like, it'll tell you, you can sum it up, like, where the dollar
Yes,
value
I'll
is
answer
going
that.
up,
I'll
right?
answer that. Yes.
So, like, we're still growing the scene, and like, sure, sometimes there's going to be lulls in certain products, and it's going to feel like, hey, like, there's not a lot going on here. And sometimes that's, hey, we didn't find a good tournament organizer for this particular window.
Hmm.
Although it's pretty rare now. There's so many people that are
So
coming
many. Yeah.
in and
Hmm.
willing to do that. But sometimes it's just, hey, like, we think that the game isn't particularly stable because we're going to do some crazy content update or something like that. And remember, like, it's not just the ranked audience, which I am a member of myself,
Hmm.
but it's
Hmm.
also the casual players who are coming in and they want to go play campaigns exclusively.
Right.
So
Right. Right. Okay,
yeah.
okay. So yeah, you've just talked about it. So big news recently, Red Bull Wololo Legacy has been announced.
Yeah.
And this will be another massive LAN event taking place again in Heidelberg. And this time it will feature Age of Empires 1, 2, and 4. AoE 1 gets a prize pool of $50,000. AoE 2 gets $200,000. And this is by far the biggest prize pool in the long history of the game, and AoE 4 gets $300,000, which is also the biggest prize pool ever for the game. So much money. So, when did negotiations start for this event, and whose idea was it to include several games?
um so again, like, it's always a committee thing, but obviously coming out of Red Bull Wololo 5, we talked with the team over there at Red Bull and we're like, hey, like, we should do this again.
It started
This
right
was,
away. It started
yeah.
right away after the event finished.
I mean, there was probably a week or two where we took some
Right.
time, and then there was the Age 4 launch. So I'm not saying that it happened super fast there, but
Right. Right.
yeah, like, everybody came out of that event going, "That was awesome. Let's go do that again." That was very cool. Um, so, like, obviously we've had a good partnership with Red Bull. Like, it's now a couple years running. I guess I'll drop the name. Chris Hess is the guy over at Red Bull that we've been working with, and he's the guy who planned a whole bunch of those events and has done
Hmm.
a really good job with that.
Hmm.
So I met with him this morning, actually, and
Right.
we were
Cool.
talking about stuff. So,
Hmm.
like, this particular tournament, we basically looked at and said, "Hey, look, this is the 25-year anniversary of Age of Empires,"
Right.
and Legacy, like, all this stuff has to be part of the celebration that we're doing here, and specifically on Age 1, like 50,000 US. Like, I think we should stop saying 50,000 US and call it what it is, which is 1.1 billion Vietnamese dong. Like, that's a big deal. A billion Vietnamese VND.
Hmm.
That's a big deal.
Hmm.
So, and it sounds way cooler because now we have a billion
A
tournament.
$1 billion tournament.
um, so yeah, like, it's a big deal. That's the 25-year anniversary. Things have been going well for Age of Empires. Obviously, going back to Heidelberg, and we wanted to figure out how can we make this thing even bigger and better than the last one. So, bringing in Age of Empires 1 and bringing in Age of Empires 4 to that event, just to kind of get those fan bases, which have substantial followings on the esports side, but that are also kind of split. There's, like, there's the Age 4 audience that's like one group of people. There's the Age 2 audience. There's
Hmm.
another group of people, and then there's the Age 1. There's not a lot of, like, cross like
Crossover. Hmm.
pollination
Hmm.
between those. And I'll also say, like, Most people don't even know that the H1 audience is there who are in the West.
Right.
Just like most
Well, it was
people who I talked to in Vietnam didn't know that there's like even an Age of Empires 4 game that has released.
interesting.
So
Interesting. Wow. Okay.
like it is a goal of kind of bringing those communities together a bit.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um,
So the big elephant in the room, of course, is why wasn't Age of Empires 3 included?
yeah. So there's a couple of Age of Empires games that weren't included in it, right? Like Age of Empires 3 is obviously a big deal, but we also have like Age Online, we have Age Myth, we've got some other Age of Empires products that I think a lot of people would be excited to have had in there. Um, it just comes down to
Just to make it clear, I'm asking about Age of Empires 3 because it has a DE version as well.
yes, yeah, that's fair. Um, yeah, I mean, the big thing for us when we were looking at doing this tournament is we wanted to grab these audiences from these different markets that had the viewership, I guess,
Hmm.
for esports, and we had to be limited in the number of things that we picked to go along there. Like it takes a long time to set up between these different games. Like all of those things have like qualifications and other things that are going in there, and like I love the ESOC guys to death. They've done amazing things. Like I was actually kind of blown away when we were doing Age 3 DE stuff. But in this particular case, it just didn't work out that we would be able to have the event the way we wanted the event to be with H3 coming in there. So I know that there's a lot of people that are disappointed about that. Um, but yeah, like that's unfortunately like we don't always get to have all of the stuff that we wanted
Sure.
for these things. And I think I'll also add like it was originally just H2 and H4. And then we thought, how can we make this thing bigger? And how do we go reach more people? And adding H1 was the next step in there.
Awesome.
So, like, then it was, well, wait a minute. What about the other Age of Empire stuff? I'm like, well,
Yeah.
like, there's only so many games that we can stick in here.
Right, right, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I saw you congratulating Nili on Twitter when the event was announced. So what exactly was his role in making this event a reality?
Oh yeah, I mean, well, Nili is Nili's the tournament guy, so there are definitely a lot of behind the scenes meetings where he and Chris and a number of other people, both on the Microsoft, Red Bull, and other side, basically all came together and said, "What is this event going to be? How are we going to go set it up? How is everything going to look? What are the cool events that we want to have? What's the quality bar that we want to go for?"
Mhm.
And Nili is one of those guys that did a lot of the heavy lifting. Like I'm the guy in the background who's just the accountant. Like, oh yeah, like go make me a cool tournament. And like Nili's the guy who goes in and actually helps make that happen, right? So
Yo, awesome.
there was a lot of work that he put into getting that out the door, and I don't know, it's super cool to see that coming
Mhm.
together and being
It's
a major
always
event.
good to remember he was the one who started things off with the first
Yeah,
by pitching the idea to Red Bull, I believe, in the first place, right?
yeah, and he also helped like craft the existing version that they have of Empire Wars that they
Empire,
use for it.
correct. Correct, correct,
So
correct. So are you
yeah,
gonna be there?
I plan on being there. Yes, I
Awesome.
couldn't go to Red Bull Wololo 5 because like my wife was 8 months pregnant at that
Oh
point in
well, yeah.
time.
That would have been
And if
hard,
I
yeah.
had gone and missed, a kid's birth, I don't think I would have lived that one down.
Mhm.
But like this time,
You're
no
gonna
kids on
come.
the way. I have every intention of being at this event.
Yeah, so Heidelberg is just around the corner from me. Do you wanna meet for a beer or something?
I'd love to meet. I can't drink beer. I'm allergic to hops, but yes,
Okay,
let's
well,
meet up.
let's make it an apple juice then. Okay, so I tell you what, if the final of the AoE
Apple
2 event,
juice.
they love it, they love it here.
I'll buy you a beer. How's that? Like, does that sound good?
Yeah, tell you what, if the final of the AoE 2 event pulls more viewers than the final of AoE 4, you're paying. How about that?
I'm happy to do that. I'll pay regardless.
Wow, that's not fair. No, we'll do it my way. All right, so a few months ago, there was a video that has sort of made the rounds in a lot of RTS communities. It is a video by Mr. GiantGrantGames titled, "The Next Major RTS Will Fail, This Is Why." And I know we've watched it, but for those who haven't, I'll just make sure to link it down below. It has 500,000 views by now, and it's a roughly 30-minute long video that I can summarize in one sentence. the vast majority of RTS players are mostly interested in single player content, and therefore developers of new games should cater first and foremost to that part of the player base, as opposed to the more, hardcore multiplayer competitive part. Now, I can't speak for other RTS communities, but in the Age of Empires 2 community, this has been common knowledge for literally decades at this point. And I'm sure this is no secret for you and the team behind Age of Empires 4 either. However, 5 minutes in, Mr. GGG here claimed, and I quote, with game releases like Age of Empires 4, the focus was entirely on multiplayer. The campaign was an obvious afterthought, the AI was garbage, and at times it verged on unplayable. So, would you agree with this assessment that the campaigns were just an afterthought?
No. Yeah, well, thank you for that wonderful lead in. Yeah, so like first of all, again, at the beginning of this interview, I mentioned you can get college credit if you beat the campaigns. Like what other game has that level of accreditation? Like there it doesn't exist, okay? Um but yeah, the campaigns definitely were like a core focus for us. And the campaigns are shorter than some of the other content because we went for that higher production quality with it.
Right.
And as far as the AI, like you know, I don't agree with his characterization of the AI, but I will say
You don't
that
agree with
it
the choice
takes
of words.
yeah, it takes time to develop good AI, and you need a game meta really before you get into having a good AI, right? And there's
Right.
a lot of people that are working on the AI specifically on Age of Empires 4, trying to improve it, trying to get it to a better spot. And like it has improved since launch, and it will continue to improve, just like Age of Empires 2 has now multiple AIs. Like I don't know how long it was before Barbarian AI came out, or the extreme version of the AI came out for Age 2 DE, but like it took a while before
Right.
you had it was the Barbarian made by the Max,
I
right?
think it was, yeah.
Like
I
yeah,
think, I think it was
like it
him.
took a while before you had a person who was capable of programming an AI who also happened to be a pro level player who
Hmm.
came in, got his hands on the game, had an established meta to go work with, and said, "Hey, like I can go win with this AI
Hmm.
against like I think it would probably take like two or three of me to beat one barbarian AI at this point." So
Wow.
um,
Uh huh.
yeah, like I, I think as you see the game get established, as you see the meta start to evolve, you will see the AI improve. And another thing that's a hurdle for the AI is the civs do play very distinctly. So Age
Right.
two, like you can go for crossbows or you can go for knights with most of the civs, and you're going to do pretty okay.
Hmm.
Um, like your typical fast castle is a pretty standard build. It's not necessarily the case with the Mongols, who like pick up their stuff and go tower rush people in Age 4, or right, like it's a very different kind of thing, and there's a lot more, I guess, things to figure out at this point in that game's development life cycle. So insofar as he mentioned the single player, like obviously single player is super important, and like we have to go focus on that if you want to be successful. And like yes, we did make a game that we wanted to be competitive friendly. We wanted to see if we could make a game that was at that level, but that's really just kind of the quality bar, right? Like if your game is good enough to be played competitively and have people who are pro level players enjoy their time playing it, then generally speaking that quality trickles down to that single player level and makes the game less frustrating for those players. So it's, I guess, landing a single player viable game for an RTS requires you to get to a good spot on the competitive side, requires you to get to a good spot on, I guess, the multiplayer matchmaking side. And then you have to get all the onboarding tools and everything else built out to get up to the proper level for single player people, casuals coming into the game and having a good time.
Right.
So I don't know. There's a lot of boxes to check, and just like Age 2, Age 4 has a long list of things that it needs to, or
Hmm.
that it's working actively against. And there's lots of people working actively against it to go try to make it better in this regard or that, to go and improve retention for single player or multiplayer or whoever else.
Hmm. So you've mentioned StarCraft 2, and I'm about to let you go, but I wonder, what does Age of Empires 4 or any new RTS game needs to do in order to replicate the success of StarCraft 2, which I believe still has by far the largest play base of all RTS games. What's their secret?
Well, I will say, first of all, StarCraft 2 is free to play, right? So anybody can go jump into that game and build that. I do not know necessarily what the secret of StarCraft 2 is. Like, obviously, I've played a lot of it. I have 2,500 matches in. I'm a masters player in StarCraft 2.
Wow.
Um, so I've definitely spent a lot of time over there. I think there are definitely some lessons that we can take from StarCraft. They do a really good job on with their editor and like like all the mod community stuff they have. They have their whole arcade section, which is really very nicely put together. It's really easy to
Hmm.
find new mods and find new ways to play the game. I think that's like a very well done component that we could learn from. And I think maybe the biggest thing for them though is just like it is such a easy entry point. Like you download the game off of the BattleNet client and
Hmm.
it's free. You can go get in, you can jump in and play a whole bunch of matches. They have good user onboarding. They've got a good single player experience. They've got a good campaign. I really like their co-op commander thing that they have in there where you've got that multiplayer campaign kind of game content.
Hmm. Hmm.
So they just have a lot of different ways to go and engage with the content. And, it's also been a title that they invested a lot into. Like StarCraft came out in 2010. So like they've had a lot of time to go and improve that. And they improved it on like AAA quality bar there. So it's, yeah, they've done a good job, quality execution. And, I obviously enjoy playing the game.
Hmm.
Like,
All right.
I've spent a lot of time in it.
Yeah,
So,
well, thank you so much, my friend. Thank you for your openness. My dodge count was at 1, I believe, so that's really good. And I thank you very much for taking the time to be here again, man.
of course. Yeah. Thanks.